Everybody, welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
David Dunham.
And David, maybe you could describe what it is you do, and we're going to talk about ChatGPT and how that ties into what you do.
So I wear several hats now. I'm a safety professional working mostly in the construction industry. I do safety consulting, and I'm also a part-time writer.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote recently in, I believe the magazine is Occupational Safety Canada, about ChatGPT. And let's just start with that. Not everybody listening may know what ChatGPT is, so let's explain what that is.
Yeah, so ChatGPT, it's a piece of software it uses what's called a large language model, and it uses deep learning to basically analyze large volumes of text.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what the users would want to know is you can ask it questions and it will generate responses that are very human-like, which is quite interesting.
And where does this apply in terms of safety? I know in the article you talked about safety documents, so maybe we could start there. Is this thing capable of writing safety documents? And if it isn't, how close is it?
Yeah, it's definitely got some drawbacks, but at first when I tested it out, I immediately thought of how I could apply this to my industry. Mm-hmm. Ours is an industry where we are often called upon to create lots and lots of documents. And asking ChatGPT to produce procedures on how to use a ladder, for instance, it quickly came up with about a 7-step procedure on how to safely use a ladder. Mm-hmm. And it was about as good as I could have produced, and certainly it produced it in a lot quicker time than it would have taken me. So there's a lot of promise there for being able to produce these sorts of documents, but they do have some flaws.
Mm-hmm. What are some of those flaws?
Yeah, so it will provide sort of general answers to questions like, give me a procedure, but it'll lack some of that jurisdictional specificity that's required in some of these documents. Mm-hmm. So if you were to ask it to produce a procedure on how to drill into concrete, it might tell you to wear a dust mask, but it won't tell you the level of protection that you need, or it might not mention using local exhaust ventilation or wet dust suppression.
And I know, I don't know, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I know that ChatGPT 3 or whatever the previous version was called was much less capable than this one. So do you think as time goes on and this thing evolves and you put more safety documentation into it, it'll become more accurate?
Yeah, my feeling is that, the side of the software that we're experiencing as users through this, through what OpenAI has put in there, is still very early. It's still very early versions of it, and better chatbots is chatbot being the name that these types of software are called. Better versions of these exist, within companies like Google and OpenAI. I think it's only a matter of time before you could ask one of these chatbots to produce a document that would be as good as anything that a subject matter expert in this field could produce.
So just in terms of, let's say this thing becomes successful and quite reliable, then where do you go from there? Like, you don't just want to replace somebody who's a safety expert, because what would be the point? You probably want to use it at scale, or you want to use it in places where it would make a lot more sense than to have a human being. What would some of those conditions be?
Yeah, so I think it has the potential to replace a very sort of narrow aspect of a safety professional's work. And, I'm someone who is, somewhat, I like to be efficient, or you could call it lazy if you want. But, I'm always looking for ways to sort of automate or replace some of those mundane aspects of my work. If we could reliably give a portion of that work to an artificial intelligence, that would free the safety professional up to do some of that work that an AI can't do. And that's, building relationships within an organization, finding out about risks down at the worker level, and really making the organization aware of those risks and good ways to control them. The documentation piece that artificial intelligence like ChatGPT can do really is just a small segment of the work that safety professionals do, and it's often not the most value added to the organization. So
Mhm.
I think this is an opportunity where safety professionals can start flexing some of those muscles that are more impactful on the organization.
Now, just in terms of documentation, I know any professional set of documents has to be, of high quality, but then safety has to be that much higher beyond it because it's dealing with human lives. So, given that lens, how do you deal with safety documents and then this relatively untested technology?
Yeah, I think that's a big concern because when I started playing around with it, I know a lot of companies out there, maybe junior safety professionals, maybe people who don't have an education or background in safety but have been tasked with that, might be tempted to rely on this software for providing good answers. And I would really caution against that because, when I tested it out, I quickly came across errors in some of the answers.
Mhm.
And interestingly, you can point them out to ChatGPT. You can say, "Hey, I noticed this was wrong," and it will go back and it'll respond and say, "Oh, sorry, I must have missed that, and you're right. Here's a correction." So it really still requires a level of oversight from somebody who has subject matter expertise in that field.
Okay, so like to address the elephant in the room, because when I heard about ChatGPT, I was like, oh, there's my job gone. No more writing for me. And same with the art
Yeah.
thing for artists. Like we're not quite at that point yet, from what you're telling me.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're still a ways off from there. And I think even when it does get to the point where it's, writing, um, when it's writing material that's indistinguishable from stuff that you or I could write,
Mhm.
there's still a place for that human aspect to say, how are we going to leverage this technology and how are we going to use it to make us better at our jobs? And I think you'll see a lot of creativity in how people use this technology, taking one step back from actually, developing the piece of writing or developing the procedure to saying, okay, how do I leverage this and use it across the organization to make things more efficient and make better use of some of those, maybe some of my soft skills or some of those other skills that I bring to the table.
And besides safety documents, are there other applications for this within the safety sphere that you can think of?
Yeah, for example, as safety professionals, we're often dealing with statistics and spreadsheets. I know ChatGPT can it has a repository that it's in its data set of macros and different formulas for Excel. So you can ask the chatbot for a formula that will, perform a mathematical function in an Excel sheet, and it will give you that formula.
Hmm.
My brother's a computer programmer, and I was testing ChatGPT with some of his questions, and it was able to write pretty uh, pretty good code in the language that he works within, and do it almost instantaneously. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for it to create good, maybe shortcuts and things that we could use with either in software or in Excel that safety professionals could definitely use.
Well, I'm hopeless with Excel formulas, so it sounds good to me. So I guess finally I'd ask, how did you learn about it in the first place and sort of go down the rabbit hole of ChatGPT? And where should people who are listening, who are interested, where should they go to check this out?
Yeah, so I learned about it just from listening to other podcasts.
Mhm.
I I was listening to a technology podcast and they were discussing OpenAI and ChatGPT. And so I Googled it, but people listening could go to OpenAI or just Google OpenAI
Mhm.
and you sign up. You can sign up using your Google account or create a new account, and you don't have to download any software. And what they're offering right now is a sort of preview version, and it's not clear how long that'll be available to the public. But you can you can play around with it. You can copy and paste things out of it, and you can, just test it out and see what it has to offer.
Okay, great. I'm sure a few people will start doing that right after they listen to this. So thank you. Thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Warren.